Joining me now for a NewsNight exclusive, Speaker Emerita Democrat Nancy Pelosi of California. Speaker Pelosi, thank you for being here. I do want to start on this very important foreign policy issue. Speaker Johnson has this four-part plan that he laid out to approve funding over Ukraine that's been stalled, funding for Israel, funding for Taiwan, and other priorities. Should Democrats actually help him move that forward?
Well, I think what he is doing gives his own party a choice. If you want to support the security for Israel, which we all do, but if that's all they want to do, they can vote for that. There are plenty of votes in the Congress to support Ukraine, and it is strongly bipartisan. But all of them don't want to support it, so they don't have to. And again, the Taiwan is very bipartisan. That's not so much of a challenge. So I don't know why, if their objection is that he's giving them all the choice that they could want, but they don't want us to have any choice, then they don't understand what the role of speaker is.
If ultimately there is a border component of this, which I know some of his members want to add into this, what do Democrats do then?
Well, there can't be a border. They may have a border component, but it'll be its own separate bill, and then their members can vote for the border component. They have a majority of the House. They may be able to pass that. But you have to remember, we are the House of Representatives. We have a Democratic Senate, a Democratic president, and if we're going to really help the people of the Middle East and Ukraine, we have to have a bill that is signed. And I think that they're working, I hope that they're working with the Senate for a bill that will pass the Senate.
The Speaker, Speaker Johnson on CNN today with Jake Tapper, he did an interview and he said that the United States should stand with Ukraine for freedom to make sure that Vladimir Putin doesn't steamroll across a European country. Do you give him credit for that? I mean, you hear the anger in his conference over this issue. Do you give him any credit for coming forward now and saying this is a matter of historical importance?
Well, it is. I think it's courageous of him to say, because you have to understand that in his own caucus, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee and the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, two leaders respected on both sides of the aisle, have said that Russian propaganda has infiltrated the Republican side of the aisle. So he has to deal with that. And for him to say that the democracy in Ukraine is an issue that we must support is a bold statement.
If he...
And I don't want to praise him too much because that'll turn off some of the.
Well, you know, there's nothing wrong with praising your opponents necessarily.
No, it is in terms of the reaction that he might get on his side of the aisle.
If this aid doesn't pass and Ukraine is in this dire situation, do Republicans deserve the blame for a failure of Ukraine to win?
No question about it. The facts are that the president and the bipartisan legislation from the Senate has carefully put forth what is needed to help Ukraine protect democracy, win in that fight, and other provisions, humanitarian assistance in Gaza, assistance for Israel to protect itself, the issue that relates to Taiwan. This has all been passed in a bipartisan way in the Senate. The president stands ready to sign the bipartisan Senate bill. For months, we've been asking the House to pass the bill. At one point, we'd have had over 300 votes for it. That is diminishing, but nonetheless still a strong majority in the House. So, yeah, no, it would be right at the doorsteps of the Republicans who have, again, been there's a Putin caucus on the Republican side. You have to understand that. And that's what, unfortunately, the Speaker has to undergo. A Putin caucus, which just espouses what Putin is saying there. It's really a tragedy for our country.
Is Ukraine losing this war?
Well, hopefully not. But if we can act now, I think with enough distance, with enough speed, with enough heft in what we send there, then I think they can win the war.
Was it a mistake for the Biden administration in the early stages of this war? There was a lot of deliberation and hemming and hawing about whether they send certain types of weaponry in and what sequence, and is it too soon? Would it provoke Putin? Was all of that back and forth wasted time in retrospect?
No, I think that the president deserves a great deal of credit. because of the initiatives to help Ukraine have been multilateral. It's been the EU, it's been G7, it's G20, even other countries outside of Europe, Japan and some other countries in Asia have been very supportive. And so you have to move in a way that not only enables you to send your support, but to have the support of other countries as well, because they need a great deal of support.
Do you think on the issue of Israel that where things stand right now between the United States and Israel, this relationship has been tense for several weeks, maybe months now. Is it too late to repair that relationship between President Biden and Netanyahu?
No, of course, it's never too late to repair a relationship, but Netanyahu has to come around. He has not been a peace-oriented person.
Do you think it's possible for him to be?
I've always questioned that for decades now as to whether he was capable of peace, wanted to do peace, or was afraid of peace. And I feel so sad about what happened on October 7th. It was brutal. What Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, did in Israel was horrible. And the response that Israel has made is one that has serious humanitarian concerns. And so we'd like to see support for Israel to defend itself. It's in our interest for them to be secure in that dangerous neighborhood, but also for us to prevent starvation and famine and dehydration among children and families. And
you've said in the past that you do not think that the United States military aid that they provided since October 7th has been responsible for some of the serious attacks frankly, on civilians that have occurred in Gaza. But when you look at the World Central Kitchen attack that happened, that really shocked the world, if it turns out that American weaponry was involved in that, would that change your view about what needs to happen going forward as it relates to the provision of lethal aid to Israel?
Well, what we have said in our letter a week ago or so was that there has to be an investigation of how that happened, and we shouldn't be giving any more weapons until that happens. Now, the Israelis are conducting an investigation. I myself think we have to go beyond that. I think there should be an independent investigation of how that happened. It was beyond the pale. But nonetheless, the letter that we sent was very discreet in terms of you must investigate this because we need to know how this could have happened.
Is it still true in your mind, given where things stand, that Israel is still one of the United States' closest allies?
Well, we are close allies, yes, and for a long time, it has been in our national security issue for us to support Israel. We have shared values, we have shared security concerns, and the rest. And make no mistake, Hamas is a terrorist organization, and they have in their criteria that the destruction of the state of Israel. So understand that this is a dangerous kind of situation. However, the response to that is managed, has to be in a way that doesn't produce famine and starvation and dehydration and dislocation for people. There has to be a more discreet way to secure Israel.
I want to just putting this all together. I mean, ultimately, these votes on Israel, on Ukraine, could cost Speaker Johnson his job. Mm-hmm. Marjorie Taylor Greene, you heard her there earlier, but she said whether it happens 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, or in the next majority, Representative Mike Johnson will not be the Speaker. Do you think ultimately that's true?
I don't think that, look, for 20 years I was leader or Speaker, and we have to respect our caucus and the rest. But we also have to respect the House of Representatives, the integrity of the House of Representatives. These people who are using the motion to vacate show a bankruptcy of their own ideas to prevail in the marketplace of ideas, that they would have to resort to that. And it all traces back to the previous Speaker who shrunk the speakership by enabling people to take it down to one person can vacate the chair, because that's what it took for him to become Speaker of the House.
Would it ever be considered for Democrats to actually step in and save Mike Johnson?
That is
do you
up
think
to
it should
Hakeem
be?
Jeffries and our caucus, and I leave
Would
it
you
up
do
to
it?
him. I would
you
leave it
vote
up to
to
him. Well, I have been prepared to do that in the past, not with this group, because this is a very, this is a different, I would say, breed of cat, except my daughter has a cat, and she would not like me identifying cats with these people. But nonetheless, the institution is very important. You cannot have one person decide that they're going to take out. Now, understand this, they don't have a big majority. I didn't have a big majority. I had 2 votes. They have 2 votes. And so, but a speaker cannot make the tough decisions that have to be made unless he is willing to risk his or her job. And we come to do a job, not to hold a job. So I think that the speaker has an understanding. Now, again, I came up through the ranks. You know, I was the whip, I was the leader, and I was the speaker. So I understood what needed to be done. This is all new to him.
A very quick rise for Mike Johnson, who just before this was virtually unknown, even by his own colleagues. I do want to get to another huge issue, which is the issue of abortion. As you know, today in Arizona, Republicans failed to take up a potential repeal of this 1864 law that bans virtually all abortions in that state. I mean, just taking this from a political perspective, I know you understand the impact on women, but having failed to now do this, despite Trump saying that they should repeal that law, are Republicans basically handing Democrats the issue of this next election on a silver platter?
Well, let's put it this way. I wouldn't, I think Donald Trump is going to, if he were to be president, God forbid that that should happen to our country, but if he were, he'd be for a national abortion ban. Make no mistake, I don't care what he says, but that's what he's about. And that is what's happening in Arizona. Now, he may, from a political standpoint, want to hedge that. But the fact is, this is about an abortion ban. And it's about damaging the survival of women who may be in a situation where they need to terminate a pregnancy. I say they should, I don't know, take a lesson in the birds and the bees. I don't think these guys even know what's going on when it comes to all of that. But I do know that disrespect for women, not understanding that a woman's right to choose is a democracy issue. It's a freedom issue. It's about people making their own decisions. It's an economic issue. It's a kitchen table issue about the size and timing, if they want to have a family or not. So this isn't just about whatever the political issue they want to call it. Make no mistake. Therefore, a federal ban on abortion.
Before you go, the Supreme Court yesterday heard oral arguments in a case that is important when it comes to the people who have been charged with January 6th related offenses. It's called Fisher versus United States. We talked about it a little on the show yesterday. The court seemed very open to the possibility of really stripping those charges from, it could be some 350 January 6th insurrectionists. What do you think the impact of that would be if they do rule in that way?
Well, I'm as a victim of January 6th, when they were out to get me to put a bullet in my F-word brain, and seeing the quest they had for the vice president and the danger. 5 people died that day. Police officers died that day, many injured, some permanently. It was a terrible thing that happened to our country, our Constitution, our Congress, our Capitol. But I'm not, as a victim of that crime, I think it is inappropriate for me to just talk about what the legal aspects of it are. That's up to the courts and the lawyers to decide. But I will say the facts are these. It was very dangerous. It was planned in advance. It was motivated. It was, again, instigated by the President of the United States. And again, not to question the legal discussions of the court, because I think it's inappropriate as a victim of that crime for me to talk about the specifics of the law.
All right. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, thank you very much for joining us tonight
My
here
pleasure.
in studio.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.